Morning, folks. This is Jeff. There's Tommy. And there's Brooks. This is a really sad and solemn video for you as I sit here this morning with a coffee and kind of contemplate my bad decision. Monday afternoon, I decided to open this poultry one netting that has been working great. When I keep it in place and make the right decisions, it's great. It's about 4.5 feet tall. It does have the smaller mesh webs, fencing, whatever you want to call it. Smaller spacing than the sheep and goat netting that the ewes and the ram are in over there behind me. Beautiful morning here. Solemn couple days. Monday afternoon, as I reflect, I made a bad decision. Most of the issues that I've had on the farm have been based around a bad decision that I've made. I've made a few. Early on, when I bought this coop, I was excited about getting them out on the grass underneath the free range, and we were moving them, which I was excited about as well. And we ran over a few young chicks, 3. That was my first bad choice of my farming experience here. But Monday afternoon, probably around 2:30, which was way too early in retrospect, I decided to untie the netting from the corner of the laying mobile here. I call it a mobile because I can hook it up to my tractor and drag it around the farm onto fresh pasture so that I can have pasture-raised eggs and chickens. Anyway, different than a term free range. When you're looking at buying eggs, there's some marketing. There's cage-free, free range, and pasture-raised. Actually, pasture-raised are the best, which means that the birds, the hens, have full access to fresh grass and pasture all the time. In this case, mine do all day long. And then they go in the coop at night, and they're secure in there from nighttime predators. So anyway, back to Monday. This is going to be maybe a little bit of a long video, but I think I'm going to try to be as specific and direct and honest as I can. I opened up the side of the Premier One netting, and I let them free range. And the reason I do that, or had a tendency to do that in the past, which I've done it, probably maybe 100 times in the last year. I don't let them free range when I'm not here. I typically only let them free range for a few hours a day. And I guess the moral of this story is, if you're going to let your birds free range, you're going to set yourself up for predation in more ways than one. From what I understand, prior to Monday night, I've lost about 4 birds total in a year. And I believe 2 or 3 were hawks, and one was a nighttime predator where one of my young roosters was too naive, or I'll call stupid, to go in at night, and he was under the coop there, and I didn't have the netting tied up because the majority of the chickens, including him, normally would go inside. And he had a tendency not to, and it was my mistake for not tying it up. And again, I guess as I reflect back, I wouldn't call the first 2 a mistake, an honest mistake on my part, but it would still had to do with my management decisions. And it was the first 2 I ever lost. I had this egg mobile with the netting down really close to those 2 tall trees down there. The two biggest trees in my civil pasture here. Which reminds me, I might get a ladder and go up there and trim those down to about maybe 10-15 feet from the ground. That way the hawks won't be able to land in those tall, solid branches. So I think what happened on my first loss is the hawk was able to land in that tree and then pounce down and use its talons to get a couple of my birds. I lost 2 down there, and then I decided to move away from there and haven't been back in that area since. And until I trim those trees, I'll probably purposely keep this particular coop with the hens away from those trees. My first eggmobile, which I purchased, which by the way is kind of an ideal chicken coop, to be honest. It allows you, it's light enough that you can pull it around with a truck or a tractor, probably a 4-wheeler if you've got 4-wheel drive. It's probably would hold about comfortably 30 to 40 hens. It's got really nice nesting boxes, outdoor enclosure, really nice built. And you know, in retrospect, I would have probably built an enclosure like that on this coop. Having said that, I think this Premier One netting will work as long as you know how to manage it. So back to Monday, I opened up the netting and let them free range, which again I did probably 100 times. I know when I was free ranged, I had a risk associated with it, but they just like going into the woods and scratching in the dead leaves and getting bugs, and I knew it was nutrition for them. I knew they liked to do it. I liked watching them do it. It was just, I guess, nice to see them be able to go out and kind of do their thing. Where I made a mistake though, is I let them out way too early in the afternoon. It was a cold, miserable day, which I should have just left them inside the netting. And it was so cold and windy and rainy that I went inside the cabin for a couple of hours total. I came out about 4:30, 4:45 to go get a bag of feed over about 3-4 miles away. I came back and they were all over the barnyard and pasture and having a good time doing their thing. And then I walked out, and over to the left, there's about 10 yards from my fence, on the other side of my fence, I saw something white laying in the field, actually on my neighbor's pasture. And I walked over there, and it was a plume of feathers, probably about 3 or 4 feet in diameter, with a dead bird, a dead breast hen right in the middle of it. And then I was thinking, oh no. And as I came up the hill and walked through my pasture, I saw 2 or 3 more. And I was just devastated. And they were all intact with the except of one, had his head missing. I did get a video of the carcasses and things, but it's just too graphic. I'm not going to show it. I did it for my own use and reflection probably sometime. I don't know if I'll ever watch it again, honestly. But anyway, long story short, I ended up losing 14 hens and 2 roosters. 2 breasts, 1 colored breast, which I'm not really that fond of anyway, so that was a loss of a life, but not necessarily a huge loss for me as far as my farm operation. And another really nice other genetic line breast rooster perished, and 14 hens, 3 of which were breasts. So I lost a total of 5 American breasts, 2 roosters, and 3 hens, and I lost a couple barred rocks and others. Actually, right up here, you can see right there, like my truck was parked right here instead of over there, and you can see these piles of feathers. There's one over there by the water tank, there's one right here, and essentially they were scattered all the way across this entire 4-acre pasture here. And I've done some research on YouTube, and what leads me to believe that it was probably a dog, and it was probably my Amish neighbor's dog. Haven't seen the dog on my property, but one time I saw it over there in the corner, real near where the hen was. And I guess that's my first mistake. I did see the dog once. I've never seen him on my property. I really, to be honest with you, wasn't worried about dogs. In retrospect, that's naive. From what I understand, dogs are probably one of the larger predators when it comes to chickens. Now, the reason I'm not too worried about dogs in the past, I haven't been worried about dogs in the past, is because my farm is extremely remote. I have a few neighbors, four or five. I don't see stray dogs that often, although I have seen that one dog one time. Not on my property though. And just to be clear, I did not see him do this, so it's speculation at this point. The reason I believe it was a dog, it was not done at night. I have, like I said earlier, lost a couple of birds to hawk, and those two birds I found partial carcasses. Basically, the majority of the intestines, the stomach, the breast, the heads. Really the only thing I found were the legs, feet, the bigger bones, and in one case on one of the hens, about half of a carcass. So apparently, you know, if you've got a hawks, they prey, they perch, they pounce with jugulars. They're smart enough and savvy enough, and instinctively they, from what I understand, use their talons to come right down and get the chicken in their jugular vein, let them bleed out, and then they eat them on site until they're light enough to carry away if they're nesting, and if not, in the case of the two times that I have had hawk predators, they just left the carcass, you know, the weight of the bones and things. They ate what they needed and left it. Both of those times I was not staying at the farm, and it happened, I would assume, during the day sometime when I had the coop and the netting over there where the hawk could perch and fly in. And at that time I had them in the open, the bigger fence, the bigger netting, the bigger sheep and goat netting, which honestly works well, with the exception of you get a few hens that are brave and smart enough to just get through the netting and do their thing. This poultry netting works extremely well. I guess I did lose one barred rock rooster early on. For some reason he was caught up. He was about halfway up the netting with his feet tangled up, and he was hanging upside down and dead when I came out one morning. That was a freak accident. I think those things are going to happen and probably somewhat unpreventable. It has not happened since, and so in general I'm very happy with this Premier One poultry netting. It works really well, and I'll get into the do's from my experience in a minute, but I want to finish up with the don'ts. Sorry, this video is getting a little long, folks, but it's meant to be to share the ups and the downs, and this is particularly obviously a very big downer in my farming experience so far in the past year here at Goods Golden's farm. Chickens that I lost were very similar to the ones that you see here right now. Rhode Island Red in front of me, there was one of those. There was a couple of barred rocks, and again some breasts and a few others. So I got back from the feed store about 4:45. Everything was fine. The birds were scattered all the way around the farm. It was nasty, rainy, windy. They were still enjoying themselves. That's where I made my mistake. Should have bundled up and stayed out, sat in the barn, sat in my truck, whatever. But I went in the cabin where it was warm and came out about 7:15, 7:30 to check on things, and that's when I saw, in the case of 16 carcasses. The reason I think they were dogs, going back to that, they were not blood out. There was a plume of feathers about 3 or 4 feet in diameter all around them. And the birds, with the exception of one missing the head, were really all intact. Very few feathers plucked out of them. Very few. In the past, when a predator takes a hen or a bird, they're doing it for food. And you'll find, from my experience, a little of what I've had with predation before, which is essentially, like I said, hawks and one ground predator. In the case of the hawks, I did find half or 3/4 eaten carcasses with feet and bones left. And in the case of the ground predator, I just found plumes of feathers with no carcass. So there was feathers around the coop where actually the attack took place. And then a couple places scattered across the farm, kind of in a straight line, there were more feathers. So what that tells me, and for those of you that are experts on this, the chicken was attacked, killed, carried away, stopped. It was night. It was definitely at night. Carried away, stopped, either attacked and drug away alive, and then stop and make the kill later, and that's where the other feathers are, or kill, attack, kill, and then stop and start to eat the bird. But anyway, those are classic signs of an animal that got a bird because they needed something to eat, and that's the circle of life. What I understand in case of dogs, from doing a little more research, is they do it more for fun, and they're not doing it for food. They're most likely being fed, but they do it it's just a natural instinct. So they run around, chase birds. Hens in particular, from what I understand, will hunch down, because if you have roosters, which I do, if they are used to being bred, which these hens are, and so when they're being attacked like that, they just hunch down. It's a natural instinct. They think they're going to be bred, and in this case, it looks like the dog just breaks their neck. Probably, if I've seen a dog, attack a groundhog or a rabbit occasionally, or even a squirrel. My Goldens have done that, kind of on accident occasionally. They don't mess with my birds. And I do have 2 Goldens, Tommy and Brooks. For those that watch my channel, they're with me right now. They're with me probably like 98% of the time, on and off the farm. I don't leave them alone outside, ever. They're just always with me. It's just the way we do things, whether we're at the farm or anywhere else. And they're trained. It's not that I don't leave them outside, because I don't trust them. Honestly, I wish I could leave them outside more, because they would be good guard dogs. They do see hawks and birds and mostly vultures, turkey buzzards in our case. There's some black-headed vultures around here as well, which is a whole other story that I don't have to be concerned about when my lambs start lambing here, and my ewes start lambing here in another week or 2. I'll cover that probably when I do a lambing video. Hope I don't have any first-hand experience to tell you about. The reason I think this was a dog is because there was so many in such a short period of time. It happened between 4:45 and 7:15 in broad daylight on a rainy, cold night. Misty, cold night, I should say. A little bit breezy. And there were just carcasses laying dead in like a said, a 2 to 3 foot circle of basically neck feathers, small feathers, no tail feathers, no wing feathers, nothing like that. I will say that I found 14 carcasses that night. Dark on me, I walked the whole perimeter and around the edges of the woods and things and found 14 that Monday night. And then Tuesday morning I found 2 more. I found one essentially in the open right behind me here. That was a Rhode Island Red, and she was pretty much looked like the rest of them, so I didn't know. I don't know if it just got dark and I didn't get a chance to find her and bury her, or I left her lay because like I said, it was dark and I missed her, or if something drug her back up. But I'm kind of surprised by that because she wasn't eaten, and I think if something would have found her, they would have eaten her. But she was pretty much found the way that the rest of them were found. I do believe she was drug up by something, but she wasn't eaten at all. And I found my big breast rooster towards the back corner of the farm back there, past the sheep and the chicken tractors, kind of right over the top. The chicken tractors about 5-10 feet from the woods back there. And his breasts were eaten, and he was probably about half eaten. So my feeling is I missed him, his carcass, the night before in the dark, and something found him throughout the night and did have a meal from him. I don't think I think it was an after fact. So basically, the moral of the story, in my opinion, of the don'ts, if you're gonna let your chickens free range, make sure you're around. I guess is the moral of the story. I haven't had any problems at all when I've been with them. If I decide to let them free range again, which I may or may not, I might just never let them free range again. I mean, they basically free range all day. It's essentially a fresh pasture controlled free range, and the reason I control them most of the time is for their sake, for the sake of keeping them safe. And the only times that I've let my guard down and gotten too naive, I guess I'll use that word, is when I've had problems. I've gotten overzealous, overexcited, overanxious, made a few mistakes, and I've just gotten naive that nothing's gonna happen to my birds. And I don't have wild dogs to worry about, which is just not the case. If you're gonna free range chickens, based on my experience of a year now, and if you don't have guardian dogs, which I fully intend to have guardian dogs on the farm, and really would like to raise guardian dogs to guard chickens and lambs and get along with domesticated house dogs, in the case of Tommy and Brooks, at the same time. That's going to be the tough part, is training them to be kind and gentle to Tommy and Brooks, but a guard dog for all other dogs. I mean, I don't know if that's possible. I'll have to do a little more research on that one. But I would like to get guard dogs, and until, once I get guard dogs, I might go to more of an open range, free range system. But in the meantime, if I ever decide to free range again, which may be a while from now, just because I don't want to have these chickens go through any more trauma. The ones that survived, obviously, it was a very traumatic experience. I was, quite frankly, less than, excuse me with the camera there. I was frankly in the cabin down there, less than 100 yards away from the entire thing. Probably did have YouTube on, and didn't hear anything, which was interesting to me. I wish it would have been a little warmer. I wish I would have had the windows open. I wish a lot of things, I guess. But just to give you an idea of kind of what happens when you have this type of predation, that's the thing I'm talking about. Just small neck feathers. They're here, and there would have been carcasses laying right near them. Here's some more. Just not the level of loss of feathering that I've had with my other ground predation and my hawk predation. This is actually lamb wool here, or lamb hair that they're shedding. I hear sheep are now shedding. But yeah, you can see over here, there was a hen here. Feathers in this case maybe about 4 feet in diameter, with some, mostly, like I said, small, you know, down feathers. And then there was another one right here in a small area, just very few feathers, and there would have been a carcass laying here. So there was, you know, 2 here, 1 over there, 2 up there, 1 15 feet on the other side of the fence over there where I'm thinking the suspect dog lives. And on the back of the farm there was several more, and out in the field further there were several more. And there was one about 30-40 yards across my fence line into my back neighbor's property. So I think what happened here is a dog came over, started chasing chickens. And from what I understand, the hens will crouch down, the dog will pounce on them, break their neck. Essentially, you've seen a dog, going back to the rabbit or the groundhog, squirrel. You know, dogs, when they find something, they just shake it profusely, and then they kind of move on. They're not obviously killing it for a meal. They're killing it out of instinct and fun. And that's just what they do. I guess when they're wild and they're not being fed, they would have a meal. And instinctively, that's how they probably found their food. And I'm not saying that my boys haven't done it. They'll chase wild animals. I've taught them early on not to attack the chickens, and they don't. I trust them 100%, or at least 90%. They are still dogs. You know, I'm not sure I would put them in a pen with a chicken in a long period of time. But when they free range and things like that, they don't bother them. I've had chickens actually come right up and like peck their feet or peck their ears, and they'll jump or, maybe growl a little bit because they're in their space. But, right here's a classic example of where I lost one. So that tells me that those of you that have had this problem, I'm sure you're gonna probably agree with me that this was a dog. And I was just too naive to think that I would have a dog come on my property and kill my chickens. Yeah, I was prepared for other predation. And let me switch to the does now, I guess. So this is a good do. I mean, this coop here is, in retrospect, I wish I had about 4 of these instead of. I built this one larger. It's still fine, but it's just, I have to use the netting. It's a little more labor. This one, I could put about 40 to 60 hens in here. There's 9 hens and 1 rooster in here, and that's not near enough, honestly, for the capacity of this coop. And the reason that I did this coop, or only have those 9 hens, is because this is my American breast breeding flock. I'm going to start gathering these eggs soon, now that it's warming up consistently, and gathering these eggs and hatching them in 28 egg incubator batches with my incubators. So I got 2 28 egg incubators. So starting today, I will start collecting eggs out of here, and I'll incubate breast chickens. So this coop is, fully contained, aerial protection, big 4x6s on either side, 4x4s on the end. The only type of automatic run chicken door, which I absolutely love. For those of you that haven't seen it, it's absolutely one of the best chicken doors that I can recommend. It's essentially a light sensor. So these are the do's of protecting predation. Sorry about the length of the video here, but I want to be informative here. Those run chicken doors are awesome. They run on 2 AA batteries that'll last about a year. I just replaced these 2 after about a year. And they open automatically and they close automatically. Open at daylight and close at night. And frankly, they're foolproof, and it's a great company. You know, I think they're about 180 bucks, but well worth it. So I really don't worry about predation in this coop whatsoever. I mean, a weasel could get under either end, the back or the front, the way it's designed so that you can move it. But, you know, I haven't had any problem, and I just don't think I'm going to have those types of problems here in the daylight. If I haven't had them in more than a year, I don't think I'm going to. So in retrospect, I'd have 3 or 4 of these coops. I did pay about 3,500 bucks for it. In my opinion, very well worth it. Bought it locally, Amish built. Can't say enough about this coop. They've got smaller versions of this for the backyard enthusiasts that want to only keep maybe 15, 20 hens. But I really believe that I could really fairly comfortably, if you move it, you know, I got these eyelets on either end, I can easily move it with my truck or my tractor. And I believe you could move it with a 4-wheel drive 4-wheeler, no problem, or side by side. But you basically move it every day, and you can kind of see what they're coming off of, which is a whole nother story about regenerative ag. We'll do a follow-up video on that. And then, sorry I'm all over the place here, folks, but this is just, I'm just trying to get the word out there, and then you can see what they're coming on to. And then later today or this evening, I'll pull them forward and they'll go on to this pasture. They'll get whatever's on the ground to eat, the whole length, both underneath and out front, so they can get plenty of shade, get out of the weather, get, you know, they like to be protected. If there's any air predators, whatever, they can go under there and feel safe. Same thing over here, kind of copied that, same underneath. The chickens can go underneath and they're fully protected with hardware cloth. They can go underneath in front, and they hang out under there and get fresh air, and you can see her foraging because she's on basically the same grasses that she's on here. So they have, in this case, they have probably about 20 yards by about 8 yards deep and wide to forage on fresh forage, and I move this frequently. The key is, regardless of what you're doing in regen ag, the key is high density, small area, high impact, frequent moves. So the way this coop works is I can leave it sit in one place, like I just came off of this here. Now this looks like it's putting a lot of pressure, which it is. It's putting more pressure than I normally would, and that's because this is going to be my market garden. From the corner of the barn here over, I'm going to put probably 8 to 10 50-foot beds in here, and this is why I'm putting more pressure on this with manure and, you know, taking it down pretty well. They're stirring it up and taking down the vegetation. But normally I would come off and it would look more like back here where the garden's not going to be. And you'll be surprised in another 2 weeks how they've stirred up the natural seed bank, and you'll have clovers and all kinds of things coming back here. That's another story. But back to the do's. The way to manage this with this coop is this netting can be electrified, which is coming off over there. It's hot, coming off that hot point. I can make the whole fence hot off of a handle on the gate over there. I run this poly wire over to this right here, and I can make it electric. It's not electric now because I'm out here. Every time I leave from now on, I'm gonna make sure my fences are on. That's step number 1, do's. If you're gonna use poultry netting, or in this case, the premier one, sheep and goat netting, if you're not out here doing chores, just keep the power on it. That's my rule number 1, my advice number 1. Is just keep the power on it. You might as well. That way, if any dogs or anything like that attack in daylight or at night, you've got protection. The lambs were okay, thank goodness. They were shook up, and they were at the bottom of the hill, which is unusual for them. They were actually free ranging as well when this all took place. That's a whole nother story. They were shook up, but thank goodness they were not harmed, which would have been devastating. Not that losing 16 chickens is not devastating, because it is. So you can see another one right over there. They're just, like I said, there was another one back there in the corner, just scattered all over the place, and I believe it was definitely a dog in retrospect. So back to the do's. This fence can be rotated. So in other words, I gather the eggs over on this side where the latch is there. So I've got roll-out nest boxes that I can gather the eggs on the outside of the coop on purpose. When I built this, I designed it that way. But I've got these eyelets on the coop, and I can run the fencing right down to the hardware cloth, and I can tie it right to the edge of the coop. But I can swing this essentially about, I'm going to say, I could swing it and surround the entire coop. But then I wouldn't have access to the door where I put the feed and water and the egg gathering side. So what I do is I use the front and the other side. I've got eyelets on this back side over here as well, right there. So you can see today this was tied on this eyelet right here, and the fence came over this way, and you can see where they put the pressure on the ground, and it came over and came up this way and to this corner right here, and went across right here, and then was tied to the other side over there where the hot point is. So this morning what I did is I moved it, and now I've got a long rectangular paddock, if you will, or fenced in area that allows for them to be on this fresh grass. Now I'll leave them on here today, and they'll make this grass look like the grass that's where those hens are closer, or probably at the end of the day it'll look more like this. And then I'll move it this way towards me on an angle, and so tomorrow they'll essentially be on this ground, and I'll probably move it all the way over to about right here and have it going back towards the coop. And then the next couple of moves that I have, I can go over there where my Tommy Bahama and Brooks are standing, and I can come over here and swing the netting all the way over this way, and they can forage on all this pasture where we are standing right in front of us. So my advice is don't build permanent structures. If you've got something to move your infrastructure, a truck, a trailer, or a tractor, side by side, a lawnmower, whatever you have, depending on the size of your structure, move it around your property. That way you don't, if you don't, your chickens are going to basically be on something that looks like this in a matter of 2 or 3 days and forever. And we've already discussed the nuances of free ranging. And if I lost my train of thought, if I do decide to ever free range these guys again, which frankly I probably will, it'll be some time before I do that. I will always do it later in the evening, probably the last hour of sunlight, because they instinctively start to go back into the coop, half an hour or so before sunset. So if I ever let them free range again, which I likely will eventually, it'll be under only supervision when when the weather's good and I'm out here on the farm and I'm doing, I can keep my eye on them, close eye on them. In a lot of cases, I'll probably just sit down with a cocktail, a bourbon, and just watch them range with the boys, and be here to watch for predators. I instinctively thought it was a pack of coyotes at first because of the amount of death and destruction, but frankly, even if it was a pack of coyotes, I think they would have taken 2 or 3, and the carcasses would have seen a lot more feathers, a lot more evidence of getting into the bird for a meal. And I just don't think I would have found the carcasses. They would have carried them off and eaten them, or taken them back to the den, or whatever they do to survive. I think this was a dog that just came out and was instinctively having fun and chased down and killed as many chickens as he could. And that's what it boils down to. So there's some do's and don'ts. I'm sorry I went all over the place. I'm a little bit, I don't know what the word is, distraught, I guess. Best word I can come up with. The good news is I have been able to find 18 chicks yesterday morning. Chicks are really hard to find, frankly, and about double the price of what I paid last year. I think I paid about $250 last year, and I paid about $550 this year for 18-day-old production blues. I've not heard of the breed. They're a crossbreed. I think they come out of the Czech Republic. I've done some research. I think they come out of the Czech Republic. And I think they're crossed between a Barred Rock and a Buffalo Orpington, I believe. Don't correct me if I'm wrong, but they're going to be a bluish black speckled hen. They all pullets, supposedly. You know, I know how that works. Prince there was supposed to be a pullet too. I believe he's a New Hampshire rooster, but he's turned out to be a good guy. Thank goodness he survived. He's kind of the patriarch of the flock here, and does a really nice job of, in general, warning the girls of air predators and things like that. So, but anyway, back to my chicks. I was able to find at one Tractor Supply. Most of my local chick suppliers were out, and they're selling out the same day they get them. These chicks actually were just delivered yesterday morning, and I got them around noon yesterday. And I'll come into the barn here where the brooder is, and I'll give you a positive way to end the video. Here's these girls sleeping under the heat, under the Premier One brooder, as well as under the red heat lamp. But I got 18 of these girls. They're all girls, pullets, and they'll lay 300 plus eggs a year, and they lay for about 3 years. Solid production. So I will bring those into my flock. I'll raise them up. They'll stay in the brooder for several weeks, and then I'll move them out to fresh grass in my chicken tractors, and I'll be out there on fresh grass and be moved every day. But yeah, sorry about the length of this video. Some do's and don'ts, some sadness, and some new fresh start here with the chicks. And you know, we'll get over it. The moral of the story is, if you don't think it's going to happen to you, I think you're being naive. Number one, don't rule out dogs as probably the number one predator of chickens, period. Even if you're in a remote area like I am. I mean, I'm not near a bunch of dogs, I can tell you that. I'm probably near 1 or 2, but, you know, frankly, that's all it takes. You can kind of see one of the spots here. And then I did find a hen that was kind of ruffled up back here that was still alive. She was able to get into the brush and escape, but kind of wanted to show you. I mean, there's probably, on this side of my farm, there's probably, 1,000 or so acres of nothing but farmland, conventional farmland. And there's another story with spraying glyphosate and everything out there the other day, which is a whole different story. I don't understand these conventional farmers, but it is what it is, I guess, until we're going to change it, but it is what it is for now. That's a whole other subject. Anyway, I'm going to let you go. Jeff, Brooks, Tommy's probably chilling somewhere. Tommy, probably up more toward there. He is, where we left him. Saying so long. Hope this was informative. Hope you learned something from my mistake. Hopefully, if you're getting in the chicken business, you can kind of figure out what to do and not to do. and don't make the same mistakes I make, I guess is what I'm trying to get across here, and give you as much information about my predator experience and unfortunately this devastating massacre, by far the biggest tragic event on the farm so far. But I'll say so long, everybody. Please like, subscribe, and share my videos. Look forward to some lamb being born here in the next week or two. I'll continue to share you some videos on my meat birds that are my first experience with Cornish cross and turkeys and that chicken tractor on the right as we go forward here. But yeah, I'm going to sign off. It's getting way too long. Everybody have a great day.